I've got a little, like, not to be graphic, but allergies. I'll
Oh,
just leave it
horrible.
at that.
Me too. There's.
It's just stuff. Stuff is going everywhere in my
Trees
body.
were so deprived of moisture, and now they've got it, they're just doubling up to last year too.
Oops. Started. So we've got about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to pause it or if you can.
Oh no, it's like the timer to notify. Yeah, it's I'm doing the right thing.
Okay, all righty.
It's my first time and
So
we
wrong.
talked it out.
I'm so glad you're here. Are you the presenter?
I am.
So last time,
Pretty early on in the work
I don't know
session,
what happened, but I had to hit start or show live on site on this one.
In a
Yeah, I'm
nutshell,
gonna
it's
pay
that we are
attention. She said
working
to watch
on
that.
this notion
Yes,
of
so
what
I'll
would it take to get
refresh
universal access to early childhood
When we
education.
come back,
And so we're
or
just
after you
looking
get,
for
when you
feedback.
start,
Oh.
At this
at
point, this
5:15,
is not an
I'll,
ask, it's just like informing people.
afterwards, I'll refresh it. It should
What do
show.
you think? It's just a
Just
lot of
mine.
priorities that all communities have. And
Well, right.
yeah,
And you know, we've got Tabor issues developing that.
yes.
Probably.
And
We
this
haven't
would be
said
way
that.
down the road, any kind of a tax. There's a couple of tax models there, but this would be way down the road. And we have our own issues with, you know, teacher salaries and stuff.
All right, nice to see you. Hey, Chief.
So yeah, the goal is
Thanks for
really
your
just
tax check.
to sort of educate leaders in the community and get feedback on
This
it.
thing?
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty
That's,
simple.
that's too much of a blank slate for
It is.
an elected board to even try.
I know, but
You
we've
could
got a
be
lot
even more
of.
specific,
Yeah, so if it does, check the bottom of your
like your question is, do you think this tax is right, do you think that tax is right?
Mine did.
I mean, just, if you can
Maybe a
help
little
us
crazy.
I
narrow
think
it
my
down.
two questions
Because
would
we
be,
don't have very much time.
given competing priorities, how much of a priority is this in our
Which is good because they
community?
can really grind.
And do you think that this is doable?
But
Or maybe under what condition? this
water
would be?
bottle alarm.
That's a good one, okay, thanks.
Are you gonna say that for me, or do you want me to try to say that?
Well, it'd be great if you were asking something like that,
Okay,
you know.
let me write a
But
note
I
to
don't
myself.
know. I mean, I know people are almost died from, especially mills,
Yes.
mill increases.
tonight, though I'm here as an educator and a community member. I've been part of a group of 17 business and community leaders that are looking at early childhood education in the Valley and what it would take to provide expanded or universal access to early childhood. Is there a way to expand that so that it's like in present mode? Probably okay. But you guys you can see it fine. So anyway, so we're just looking at this question of.
Natalie, excuse me,
Yeah.
Rob. Natalie, we're having a presentation, so, could you?
Yeah, it's part of our work
You know how to do that?
session.
Yes,
So-
it is the work session, yes.
Yeah.
Are you recording it?
Yes.
Okay.
Hit view, full screen.
I couldn't
Down,
barely
down.
read it.
Down, 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 down.
Everybody has a copy of that in
There we
their
go.
packet as well.
It's probably the same size, but there's less distracting background.
Okay.
So we're really just looking at what it would take to provide expanded access to early childhood education for all children in the Aspen to Parachute area. I think we have a mission to determine the programmatic need and political viability of a locally and publicly funded early childhood education program. And we've been studying this for about 2 years now, and we're at this phase where we're just coming to the community to see if we can get feedback on your feelings about early childhood education as a priority, and what you see as the viability of something like this, especially compared to the many other demands that you see in your community. So one of the things that we've learned is that a lot of folks are not really even familiar with the concept of early childhood education. What is it? And what distinguishes early childhood education from daycare? And you know, what I know, and which I've increasingly learned as an educator, I started as a high school teacher, and I've been a high school principal and now a district administrator. I have worked for some years in elementary schools or K-12 schools, but I'm a fairly recent, as a professional, I've fairly recently become involved with early childhood because we have preschool programs in our school district. And I realized I wasted the first half of my career because I should have started as an early childhood educator, because that's when brain plasticity is at its maximum. That's when kids are learning most of what they learn. Most of brain development happens in the first 5 years of life. And so by the time I got them in high school, their paths were much more set. Not to say there isn't a second phase of plasticity in adolescence, actually there is. But really, those first 5 years are so crucial to brain development and childhood development, and our society doesn't prioritize early childhood education.
Whatever, our battery's getting low.
Maybe it's battery, maybe it's user error. So what we're thinking about is not just providing places for kids to be during the day, but making sure that those are really enriching, educative environments where there's a high quality learning experience for kids. There's been a lot of research, but the most famous is probably this guy, James Heckman, who's a Nobel laureate from University of Chicago. And I focus sort of on the outside edge of this, you know, as an educator. Early childhood or preschool experiences where kids really develop life skills and happiness and those other character skills that we in Roaring Fork School District called habits of a scholar, which are also habits of a worker and habits of a spouse. Interpersonal skills, resiliency, grit, executive functioning, and we find that it reduces the need in even first grade for remedial education. The more that kids have good, enriching preschool experience, the less they need remediation in reading, math, and other academic subjects. Over the course of one's life, people with preschool have higher earnings. They stay out of the criminal justice system. And an additional benefit, of course, is that there's a huge impact on the workforce when people are juggling childcare with jobs. And so there's this magnifying economic impact. This same guy just produced a study that I read about this morning. I think it came out yesterday, that said that the impact of early childhood, the economic impact, actually extends to the whole family. So siblings and offspring of people who have had preschool, when they become parents themselves, also experience some of these benefits. That worked. So Colorado is second highest in the nation in early childhood costs. Average statewide costs are just over $12,000. You know, if you can imagine, like our average teacher salary, for example, is just over $50,000. Imagine how a family can afford $12,000 per year per child for preschool. In our entire region, there's a gap in capacity to early childhood population. So this graph goes geographically from Parachute on one end all the way up to up to Aspen on the other end. As you can see, that there's a huge gap in capacity for early childhood education. We in the Roaring Fork School District, when we just completed this bond construction, now have a preschool in every one of our elementary schools. What we find is we actually have seats that are unfunded. So we have capacity in the sense that there's space, but there's not funding to provide access for kids. You notice that the two communities here where there's more spaces than there are kids are Elgibel and Aspen, and that's, in Elgibel's case, I think because of the Blue Lake Preschool. So that's a big preschool that draws from other areas. It's not like those seats are unfilled. And Aspen has a workforce that comes up and brings their kids with them. And so there too, it's not like those seats are empty. But there would need to be a huge investment in infrastructure just to have capacity to serve all the kids if we were to find a way to provide universal access. So just in sum, why make it a priority? Kids are better prepared for school. They're better readers, more likely to graduate, more likely to have higher paying jobs and hold down jobs. They live healthier and happier lives. They sustain long-term relationships, and they have other better life skills. And then, of course, there's the workforce issues and the stressors on families that are reduced by access to early childhood. So what we've been doing over the past couple of years is just talking to people in learning, and we started with community leader. Maybe some of you were in our first round of interviews, but we talked to 19 community leaders and just tried to get a sense of where people are and where they feel this is in their priorities list. And then we conducted focus groups all up and down that geographic range, all the way up and down the valley. And then we polled 400 people. And what we found is, first of all, it's just not a front of mind issue. I mean, you know, you guys are looking at transportation, housing. We are looking at housing. We're looking at teacher wages. And so there are other more pressing issues when people, you know, when you ask people what's on your mind or what are the pressing concerns for you. However, once they developed a better understanding of early childhood education and its benefits, the vast majority were actually very supportive of expanding access to early childhood education, and 74% said they would support a sales tax increase to fund early childhood education. And so it seems like once we raise awareness, there is support. Now, of course, this isn't them comparing side by side other priorities, but overall, we're in this phase of really recognizing that there isn't a lot of awareness, but once people become educated, then there is support for investing in early childhood education. We also looked at a lot of different program models, and the one that seemed to have the pieces that made most sense to our group is one that's been in place in Denver now for close to 20 years. It's called the Denver Preschool Program, and that's a citywide tax that provides subsidies for 4-year-olds for that 1 year of preschool before kindergarten. And it's universal, meaning that everybody's eligible and they have a sliding fee scale based on means. And I think theirs goes from 20% to 80% subsidy. We wonder if even a broader range, 10 to 90%. So that is no matter how wealthy you are, you'd still be eligible for a 10 to 20% subsidy. And on the other end, up to 90, 80 or 90%, depending on your need. The reason that they focused on 4-year-olds is just simply cost, that really providing universal access for 2 or 3 years was probably more than the taxpayers and the voters would support. In Denver, they only work with licensed providers and homes who become licensed. In our valley, there's a lot of what they call friends, family, and neighbor childcare, and so our dynamics are different. And so we wouldn't rule out at this stage anything, but certainly a model that included those FFN programs, so long as we can invest in bringing up quality. So that's one of the things they did in an institutional setting and even in some of the home daycare in Denver, is part of the funding went to incentivizing improvements in quality in the centers and investment in professional development for the teachers. And then, of course, it's a last dollar in model. It's, you know, we want to add to, not just supplant existing, you know, supplemental funding for early childhood education. So these are just two different models. If we were to look at a 4-year-old model like that with the sliding fee scale, using the assumptions of the current gap or the current population of 4-year-olds, the cost of the program would be just over $2.5 million per year. And so one way to do it would be a sales tax increase of 1.2 cents on a $10 purchase, a 0.12% sales tax, or a mill levy, which would come out to about $3.60 per $100,000 of actual home value. We're not even, you know, advocating either approach. It's just this sort of, you know, makes it real in terms of what the cost would be. These are communities. Aspen has a sales tax that subsidizes early childhood education. Breckenridge, Denver, San Miguel, Summit are also already have running models. I know Eagle County is working on a similar exploration, and our group would very much like to partner with them. And as I said, at this point, we're just looking for feedback and trying to get, you know, a sense of where community leaders are in this versus other priorities. One thing I'll mention, because it's come up in a couple of very recent presentations, is with the universal full-day funding of kindergarten that the state just approved in Colorado. How does that affect preschool? It happens that in every school district is different, but in our school district, we are funded by state dollars for about 130 kindergarten half-day seats. And so since the funding formula now will make that those dollars no longer need to go to augmenting kindergarten, we can shift those to preschool. So those will be about 130 preschool slots that now might be funded for early childhood. I don't think we can expand by 130 kids by August, so we're also looking at a lot of other providers, and we already give them some of those, so we pass through some of those funds to other providers. So that will be a big lift in our valley as well, as just to have those additional maybe 130 spots funded through the state e-care funding. So I think the last slide is just, so this is what we're doing, is just talking to people and getting feedback and see if we can refine an approach that might be viable in the future. We have capacity now. The legislature approved this year creating a special tax district. It's pretty complex in our valley. Like Denver's just one city, one county, and they can do it that way. Here everything has to be cobbled together with municipalities and counties. And so if we were to do something regionally, it would require first going for just creating a taxing district and at the same time or later actually asking for voter support on a tax of some kind. So that's it. I just wanted to hear what questions you have or feedback, and we'll take notes. We're just in the learning phase right now.
Well, Rob and I talked about this just briefly before the meeting, just to sort of get a feel for what would he like to try to get out of this meeting. So I think this is kind of it. And so go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, just a quick question on the research out there as far as these little guys and gals, full day versus half day. Is full day a long day for a preschooler, and is that what you'd be trying to look at, or is it more shorter?
It's not a long day in terms of like, are those kids too little to be in full day preschool?
Yeah.
However, I think you know what the educational impact is versus what the workforce impact are, you know, might be different. And so as a workforce item, it seems like half day doesn't do people enough good.
Yeah.
But from an educational perspective, a half day of preschool every day or two or 3 days a week would certainly be a huge benefit to kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's a non-answer to your
Yeah.
question.
No, it's good. Thanks.
Well, you know, I don't think it was too long for kids, because my kid went to preschool, you know, basically as much as I went to work, and it's not like school. They have fun most of the time. I used to come in and they were singing "We Will Rock You" at the end of the day to clean up. So they were having fun. So, obviously for me, this has been a huge priority. So this has been a huge, huge priority. And, you know, it always amazes me to think like we could potentially do this in such a large geographic area. And that's why we've been partnering with Eagle County to really potentially look at a smaller geographical area to see if that would work better. Because I worry if one area doesn't pass it, the other areas then don't get it either. So that's a concern of mine, and it would be great potentially to do kind of an early child care summit where you get elected officials from a lot of jurisdictions together to try to discuss this, because I think what the legislature did by creating these special districts is a great first step. But I think we just never, besides Basalt talking to Pickton County and Eagle County, you know, the last time we talked to Carbondale about this was we were actually gonna fund a preschool in Carbondale, and Carbondale decided not to fund it in their own town. So if, I worry about what's the priorities for all the different organizations, because personally for me, it would be great that the town of Basalt could stop funding out of its general fund. You know, this year, $90-something thousand, we're funding out of the general fund for early childcare. We've been doing this since 2006. So it would be great to stop that and fund it on a larger scale by communities. So, but I do think we need to have a way to get elected officials or a group together to really flush this out a little bit more, that everyone would support this if it went forward.
Absolutely.
I was first elected in '96, I think, so was Romer the governor or already finished being the, nobody here knows that? Okay, anyway, I heard him speak on this 20-some years ago, exactly the same thing you're saying, and still here we are. So my first question is, how do developed nations take care of their really young? I mean, I assume
I
it's
would
just
say,
funded like school. That's what I would assume.
Yeah, the education systems I'm familiar with that tend to outperform us invest much more in early childhood education, and they also invest more in K-12.
But how? Where do they get the money?
That's a good question. I can't answer that. That's a very good question.
So like Germany and all
Yeah.
that.
Finland, Korea, places that really have education systems that continually outperform us in international
I
comparisons.
would love to just know
It's-
how they fund it, if it's sales tax or just school.
Probably just general tax.
One of the
What is
things,
school tax?
Tax.
No.
one of the things about all of those countries that there's like 5 sort of high performers, and they all have a national education system that's, you know, funded at the national level. So that's one distinguishing feature, and that gets in our way here is this local control thing. Even though we're funded by the state, you know, then every community is different in how they handle education to a much broader, you know, degree than other countries with really highly developed education systems.
How long will it take to form the special district? Obviously,
Well, I think it's impossible for us to even consider this year, right, November, and so the following year would be the absolute soonest. Jackie was mentioning you guys are looking at a Tabor initiative. We as a school district have teacher salaries that we have to think about, and so I really get that everybody has competing priorities. The soonest it could be is 2020, and we could, I think, at the same time go for both the district and the tax, but this is just my personal sense, is we're not nearly ready even in a year and a half.
would that
take
be a
this to
2
voters.
question then?
Yeah,
Would
it'd
you
have to be 2
approve a
separate
district
questions.
and would you approve a
Yeah.
tax
Mhm.
in whichever form? And this is just basically pre-K-4, right?
Yeah,
And 3, 2,
yeah,
1 is not.
yeah. Well, because of the cost, we just focused on a 1 year of preschool, so a 4-year-old model. You could double it and add 3-year-olds and so forth.
Oh,
And then
of
once you get, the younger you get, the more expensive it gets because the staff ratios are much more intensive.
Very restrictive.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian.
As it related to the costs you showed up there, so there was a bar graph you had where it showed the population versus capacity for a given town. And that capacity is I'm guessing, related to infrastructure in part, as well as sort of the administrative side, like the actual need for teachers. I mean, I guess where I'm going with the question, and then maybe is the assumed costs that you have to stand up this program or to run this program. Does that take into account any new infrastructure needs that, like, maybe Carbondale needs an actual new preschool to be built first before?
Right. So yeah, this is just simply seats in existing programs and kits. And so you're absolutely right, there need to be a facilities investment as well, depending too on how we did home daycare and friend, family, and neighbor daycare. So, you know, that's probably easier to create capacity in those sites. The complexity of managing it is much higher.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that we would not, like, I think if we just waved the wand now and could fund the pupil expenses, we wouldn't have the facilities for it.
Well, the question on the facilities is, would this potentially turn some of the school district preschools into more full-time?
Yeah, well, we could definitely expand. I mean, we could expand hours and we could fill every seat. I just don't have the top of my head, unfortunately, how
No, I
many
know that.
unfilled seats we are, but like, we only have a very small, like 20 kids in a year-round program, so we have a lot of room to expand that way. And to meet workforce needs, we would have to expand days, not just seats.
I hope this is a similar analogy, but when RAFTA was formed, actually, it was before the BRT, it was just RAFTA. There was a grant that somebody got, I don't know who asked for the grant, but it funded Colin Laird. I don't know if you know Colin.
I know Colin.
And he basically had ongoing meetings with every elected official, not just the mayors or the managers, but every elected official, all the way from like, Rifle to Aspen. And it was a bringing people up together kind of conversation where we didn't even know each other. And that is how we got, and then we got a state legislator, or you've already got the bill passed, but that is how we got these people who didn't know each other and were far left and far right and some in between to agree that, yeah, the little kids do matter. And we were able to pass RAFTA. And it was very hard to get everybody to sign on the dotted line in every town and county. So I'm just saying, if you have the wherewithal to obtain grant funding in some way, that you could hire a paid gun to help push this around, because I don't know how your staffing is for these dog and pony shows, but it's not enough. It's not enough to have us separately giving feedback. We've got to agree together at the same table that this is super important.
Yeah, and by the way, we have two funders, Manaus Fund and Aspen Community Foundation, and they have, like, all of us are volunteers for the most part. The staff from those two organizations are providing some of the logistical support just for scheduling and stuff. And then we hired a consulting group out of Denver to do a lot of research and conduct the focus groups and things like that. But it's really right now just a shoestring, and I think you're right. It would take some staff, you know, and investment on that end to take this, you know, much further.
And I think if we start showing support from the elected officials, there could be this, you know, there are funders in the background of Manaus and Aspen Community Foundation, but they don't want to put their money in until they really know about, is the community going to support something like this? So, I mean, it's something that seems so simple.
Not to me.
Not to me.
Well, I mean, yeah, I've been dealing with this.
The idea is simple. It's obvious that we should be doing
It's
it.
obvious that we should be doing it. It's just that it amazes me because, you know, honestly, I've been working on this since 2006 when I first got elected. I'd never expect me to be into early childcare stuff. But when I saw what was happening and what I saw for me personally as a parent, I was like, what? This is just a no-brainer. How can we not get more information out there? So.
Jen, do you have anything?
Everyone has made such excellent points. I really can only echo yes to what all of you have stated. I don't have anything original to add.
Great, well, thank you. Thanks so much for your time.
Bet.
Really
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
coming in.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
We may have, we might have an extra burrito in the back room, which is where we're going right now.
That's really nice. I actually have a date tonight.
Oh, nice.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
See ya.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Are we ready to go live? Thank you. Audience, we are live. We are going to call this meeting to order at darn near 6 o'clock and ask for a roll call, please.
Hot diggity. Okay, Gary Tannenbaum,
Here.
Bill Infante, Katie Schwer. Here. Auden Schendler, Jennifer Riffle,
Present.
Brian Slack. Here. Jackie Whitsitt.
Here.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. As always, we want to thank Grassroots for filming our meetings. It's on live. And should you not be able to sleep at night and you miss this live, you can go back to www.grassrootstv.org and watch it at another time. Our videographer this evening is the amazing Natalie Ray. Now, our mayor's coffee is always the Wednesday after the Tuesday meeting, and that's me, and I will be at Cece's across the street at 8 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes the town manager comes, sometimes the police chief comes, but I can't see that in the cards right now from looking at him. And also, just a special fun thing, this Saturday, right, is Motors on Midland. And if you have not been to Motors on Midland, you need to go. It's, well, if you like cars, it's the most fun in the whole world. There's like every old car and fire engine there. It's fun, I like it. So on to, I guess, the real business here. Our first item is the consent agenda, which is just items that are more or less housekeeping. Is there any questions on the consent agenda, or is there a motion?
Mayor, I move the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Great.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for so much. Let's see. Guess those are all consent. Okay. Our next item is, my page here.
Jennifer reads the.
Yes,
There you go.
Jennifer
Perfect.
reads the, do it.
Basalt is an inclusive, sustainable mountain community that boasts both historic charm and progressive vision. It is an engaging place to live, work, and play while offering an abundance of creative, professional, educational, and recreational outlets.
Thank you very much. Our next item is just open public comment, but it's for items that are not actually on the agenda tonight. So if you just have a comment that's kind of out of the blue that you want to make, or you want to get up, and we always try to get somebody to get up and say something they're thankful for about Basalt, or the day that you had, or your kids. Anybody? Okay. Going? Okay, gone. Let's see. Next is the mayor and council reports and comments. Anybody? Yes, Jennifer.
So I attended some of the master plan meetings in the last week, the master plan update, and I want to thank fellow counselors for showing, along with the additional staff hours. Thank you to staff for setting all that up, supporting the Empanada Emporium, and then also all those citizens who have been involved to date. And just to let you all know, you missed out. So your opportunity is to fill out the survey, and you can go to basalt.net, and there is a link from there to the master plan update survey. And that's a great way, in the comfort of your own home, office, tablet, to be able to provide your feedback to guide the future of Basalt.
There's still one more.
Yep.
Yes.
On 5:30 at RMI.
Yep.
Okay.
At RMI.
Which
So
day?
you haven't missed out yet.
Which day?
5:30, I think it's
Thursday.
Thursday?
Thursday.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is there childcare?
That's my
Yes.
last.
Their names?
Yes,
Okay.
it's fun. All the kids
No,
have had a
I'm just
good
trying to
time.
tell
Yep, thank you.
everybody that there is childcare, so
Yep,
bring the kids, bring all that. And could you get it, did the school post it on their Facebook page?
I don't know that we got it on the school Facebook page, but we were advised to do that, so we will.
Okay.
Okay, just let me repeat that, since there was a lot of people talking at the same time. 5:30 this Thursday.
No,
is-
the 30th.
The 30th, I'm sorry, 5:30 on the 30th at Rocky Mountain Institute is, I think, the last big master planning meeting. We would love to have you come, and if you missed the punchline, there's childcare and games for the kids, so. Okay, next is the manager's report. Ryan Mahoney.
I just have one thing, and we got a letter today from the Aspen Lacrosse Club, who had their big event at Crown Mountain this last weekend, which was a success again, but they wanted to make sure to extend their special thanks to two of our employees, Robert Rosindi and John Whittier, who helped with the parking mayhem that ensues at that event, as well as to Chief Knott and his crew, and Boyd for the ramp up and them getting all of their permitting in place. So I think it ended up being a great event, and that thank you is extended to our staff.
And somebody had just asked me, because I walk my dog every day there, if the park was torn up. It looks like nothing happened
No,
there.
right.
It's amazing shape, so lots of good snow and water on that park. Anything else, Ryan?
That's it.
Okay. So our first item of business that I imagine most people are here for is the public hearing and first reading of ordinance number 10, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt approving amendments to the Willits Town Center PUD to permit the Aspen Ski Company Willits Workforce Housing Project consisting of 36 unit residential building on Block 9 of the Willits Town Center PUD, Basalt. So James, do you want to kick this off?
They're not there.
We don't have the main applicant's bill is here from the Ski Co. We can start with the staff presentation, and hopefully the applicant will be here by the time we get to it. So that works. So this is a public hearing on an application that is submitted by the Aspen Skiing Company. They're requesting a series of PUD amendments to the Willits Town Center PUD to construct a 100% residential building on Block 9 of Willits Town Center. And the building is proposed to consist of 36 residential units containing 148 bedrooms. The site subject to the application is Block 9 of Willits Town Center. It's this block right here. It's located to the west of Market Street Lofts, which is this property right here. And that building has Susie's Consignment Store as well as Kitchen Collage in it for reference. It's also directly north of the site that's designated for the Performing Arts Center at Willits, or better known as TACA. The application requests 8 specific development review requests that are on the first page of your staff memo. Specifically, they are amendments to the town's maximum requirements for unrelated persons in a dwelling unit to accommodate 6 roommates in a 6-bedroom unit. The town code has a limit of 3 unrelated people in a unit. Other requests are the conversion of the required commercial development on the first floor to a deed-restricted community housing floor of 8 community housing units. Other requests are the allowance for the on-street parking that is attributable to Block 9's base floor area to serve as parking for the residential units that are proposed on Block 9. Instead of the commercial development as is approved in the PUD, as well as the reduction in the minimum sidewalk width, a reduction in the 3rd floor setback requirements that are in the Willits Town Center PUD, as well as a modification to the Market Street cross-section. This is Market Street running east and west. Sorry. As well as approval of the method of providing private open space for the units in a combined fashion, as well as the approval for 4 stories within the maximum height limit that is required on the west side of Block 9. The east side of Block 9. The review process is a 1-step review process with 1 round of review by the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council for the PUD amendment. The Planning and Zoning Commission has made a recommendation to the Town Council on the application. So this evening, staff would recommend that council treat this meeting as kind of an introduction meeting to both the application as well as the discussion items that are out there, and take comments from staff about the discussion items, as well as P&Z Chair Marin was also going to be here this evening to provide a couple comments. And then hear a presentation of the application from the applicants, and then take initial public comments and identify additional information that council might need in additional meetings to make a decision at future meetings, and make any initial comments that council may have before continuing the public hearing and first reading to May 28th, which is the next council meeting. So to begin, staff has identified a series of discussion items that are on the P&Z memos that are attached in the council packet. The applicant in the P&Z level of review made some adjustments to their plan that are outlined in the addendum to the application that's in your packet. And these changes were as a result of comments that came out of both the discussion items and P&Z's discussion. And the applicant can go through those in more detail as part of their presentation to the council. The main discussion items, we have the discussion items up here, as well as we've got them on the TV here. The main discussion items were the conversion of the commercial space that was required on the first floor to 8 deed-restricted units with a daycare professional occupancy priority is what's proposed. Other discussion items are the ability for the 6 unrelated people to occupy a unit on Block 9. As I identified, the town code has a limit of up to 3 unrelated people can occupy a unit. And then other main discussion items are the parking and vehicle storage. Regarding parking, the applicant is proposing a combination of on-street and off-street parking to satisfy their requirements. Specifically, they're proposing a parking lot with 34 off-street parking spaces on the west portion of the block, as you can see here. And then they're proposing to use 33 on-street parking spaces on Pioneer Street, which is the street to the west of the block. It goes behind the block, basically. And they're proposing to use that for the parking for apartments on Block 9. They're also proposing free bus passes to their tenants, as well as long-term vehicle storage for tenants on the other properties that they own, such as the Cypress View Apartments.
Zip it, James, the timer's going off.
Timer's going on, I guess I better
You
stop.
talk too long.
I'll try to keep it brief. As well as the Aspen Basalt Campground, which SKICO also owns, which they have excess parking on. And then also to provide 2 car share vehicles when a car share platform is established in the Mid-Valley, and to contribute $1,500 a year to bike share. As background on the Willits Town Center parking requirements, the Willits parking was set up as a mixed-use parking model originally, with the intent being that the residential development in the PUD was to be parked off-street, and the commercial development was to be parked on-street throughout the development, with the ability for the Performing Arts Center patrons to be able to use on-street parking throughout the development, as event times at the Performing Arts Center were likely to be different than the peak times for most of the businesses in the town center. In reviewing this application, the police department and staff in general had some expressed concerns about taking the 33 parking spaces on street out of the general use and kind of generating them for just the parking for this block, and felt that there may be some issues once the CAW were to be built. So staff identified 3 options for the P&Z to consider related to the parking, and those are outlined in your packet. We've also got them up here and on the screen here. Option 1 represents what the applicant's proposal was, which was to grant an easement at no cost to the applicants for the 33 on-street parking spaces, and as well as to have their additional mitigation measures that I went through, which included the free bus passes and the 2 car share vehicles once a platform was established. And then it would require the applicants to maintain and enforce parking on those 33 spaces. Option number 2 was for the applicants to actually lease the spaces from the town for approximately $20,000 a year based on an appraisal on parking and basically allocating that appraisal cost over the 10-year period. Which came out to $20,000 a year, as well as all the other mitigation measures that I went through. And then an option 3 was to sell the 33 spaces to the applicant for $200,000, which was a value of the appraisal. The idea behind options 2 and 3 is for the town to get funding source to either create additional parking on parcel 2E, which out. This is parcel 2E that the town owns that could be used for both daycare as well as public parking, or to institute other parking management activities that may be warranted in the future in Willits Town Center, so to have a funding source. I don't know if Chair Marin has shown up yet. It doesn't look like he did. But the P&Z actually recommended approval of the application with option 2 on the parking, with an additional caveat that the applicant charge greater rents or a fee for those tenants that wanted to park on site in Willits, as opposed to taking advantage of the long-term car storage off-site, or those tenants that didn't have cars also would pay a lower fee or rent. So those were the general discussion items, and as I did indicate, the P&Z recommended approval with the parking option 2. So in the absence of Chair Marin not being here, staff would suggest going into the applicant's presentation, and then we could circle back with Chair Marin. So staff would recommend taking applicant comments and then taking public comments.
Great. And could I ask you to introduce the applicants?
Yes, we have Philip Jeffries here this evening, and we're going to plug Philip's
there's
real
Bill
quick here.
right there.
Commissioner Marin is here.
Bill, you want to come up and make your comments, what you have?
You got the hook.
Well, I wasn't here, I was supposed to be here for 2 or 3 minutes, but.
Yeah, you just got here on time.
Okay, good.
Staff just kind of went over the discussion items and introduced that you had some comments on the parking scenario and the recommendation. We went through the different parking options and what generally P&Z's recommendation was. Would you like to speak to it?
Sure, I was directed to speak just to our motion, but,
Welcome, Mr. Marin.
yes, thank you all. I was directed to speak just to our motion, but if you have any questions to me about any of our other part of our review, please don't hesitate to ask. But I did want to speak to the parking component of our motion because we saw that as sort of a seminal part of what we were trying to get towards with this, and that parking was such a high item of public concern. We looked at one alternative where there was no free parking at all on site, so that any parking on site would be on a paid basis, and that the money from that paid parking plus the money from the on-street parking component would then go to fund a car share program that the option 2 on our packet talked about. So we saw that as a revenue generator, but also we saw that, and part of our discussion was that parking disincentives have not functioned well in the past, because a lot of times when those have been used, they've been in places where a car was necessary, like most of Snowmass and the Merle housing are examples where those type of things haven't worked. But this being a real transit-oriented development, being within, a quarter mile of a BRT stop, we felt that something like that with a real auto disincentive where the project was actually underparked would function in a fairly useful way. So this is a way to technically have the project parked as per code, but function with an auto disincentive of far less parking spots than that. So that was sort of the basis of our thinking on that. It was a rare opportunity for that component.
Anybody have questions for Bill?
Thank you, Bill, for coming in.
All right,
For
thank
all your
you.
hard work on
That
this
was,
project.
that was very quick. Thank you all
You
very much.
almost missed your opportunity.
Well, that's what you get for being ahead of schedule.
We're gonna take just a quick second to put in.
Worked last time, so hopefully it works tomorrow.
There we go.
Okay. Thanks for having us. Philip Jeffries with the Aspen Skiing Company, project manager. And to my right, David Corbin, senior vice president of development, my boss. I think you're going to start.
Yeah, if I could. We don't appear before this body very often. I know a few of you, but not everybody. I'm sure we're probably as much of an enigma to you as you may be to us in terms of public process. I think probably one of the first questions that might arise is, why is Aspen Skiing Company here proposing housing? It was with some irony, I looked at the Aspen Daily News today, and obviously one of the front page headline articles was on the regional shortage of affordable housing and the study that RRC and Economic and Planning Systems is actually describing and discussing at the Pitkin County Library at the same time as we're here. And that study, which was conducted and funded in part by APSHA, found that today there's a shortage of 3,900 affordable housing units in the region, which they included basically from Aspen to Glenwood, and then I think from Parachute to Eagles, so sort of a T-shaped region of resort-related, almost river-centric, resort-related communities here in our valley and appended to it. They predicted that 3,900 unit present shortage for affordable housing, of which they identified 500 units short in Basalt itself, would grow to 5,700 residents or units shortage within a decade. This isn't a new problem. We've all collectively been talking about it for a long time, and it's not easily solved. And it won't quietly go away on its own. I think if there's anything that we've learned, there's perhaps always a shortage of resources to apply to that problem. As remarkable and as laudable as APSHA's program has been over the years, we still have a problem. And we have a problem across the valley. And the length of it, and it's something that's shared by all of us, no matter where you are. Pitkin County, Eagle County, Aspen, Snowmass, Basalt, Carbondale, Glenwood, even beyond, the problem is shared by us all. It requires land and money, and uniquely transit, probably, to really resolve all those things. And it's still difficult to impossible to return on your investment in all likelihood, if it's not typically subsidized. We began to systematically address this problem about 12 years ago. At that time, we had roughly 300 beds in our own inventory for the company. And
In subsequent years, we managed to grow that inventory to present at about 600 beds, initially through the Club Commons projects in Snowmass and others. But that still doesn't quite solve even for our own needs. To give you a little background on our demographics, we have about 4,100 employees total. And we've hovered at that number really for over a decade. We really haven't changed much. Nearly 1,200 of those are full-time, year-round employees. So about a quarter of the 4,000 and change are full-time, year-round employees. And the balance are seasonal, which is kind of interesting. And of those 4,100 employees, nearly 500 already live in or very close to Basalt today. So our employees are us. I'm one of them myself. And that's not atypical for our company. We've tried to retain our workforce and keep it essentially flat. And for the most part, over the last decade, we've been, actually even almost the last 2 decades, we've been largely successful at that. One of the other interesting aspects of our company's employment base is of those 4,100 employees, about 10%, 410 of them are over 60 years old. Interestingly enough, one of the complaints or concerns that's arisen in the course of the Planning Commission's review has been the fear or the anxiety that our employees in Willits would be young and perhaps a little too rambunctious and partying all the time, et cetera. And then you think about the fact, well, actually a quarter of us, again, myself included, are over 60 years in age. And at that stage, they're not quite as rambunctious as one might imagine or fear or be anxious about. So we've got a broad demographic. The presumption that all of our employees are young and right out of school and pretty frisky is perhaps not quite accurate. Our demographic is very much like the Valley's demographic. We are the community. We are representative of the same group of people you see every day. So we aren't really different. We are essentially of you, we're of the Valley. One of the problems with having this many employees overall, over 60, and I think I may have misspoke. 410 of our full-time employees are over 60. 1,100 of our employees overall, the quarter, if you will, of our workforce are over 60. So full-time and seasonal, that's about 1,100 people are over 60. One of the potential problems, and it's being recognized more and more, is the problem of people who are in affordable housing today retiring into their homes. So in effect, housing that was created at an affordable basis 10, 20 years ago, whether it was subsidized housing or not, those employees very well retire into their own homes. And the housing then essentially becomes unavailable for the workforce. So the threat of people retiring from the workforce staying in their housing means there's less housing for workers. You're going to have to replace that worker in all likelihood that's retiring, but you don't have another house for him. So the threat of the housing crisis is actually exacerbated by those age demographics I described just a moment ago. So what have we done? Well, in the past few years, we created our own sort of housing master plan. Philip is charged with sort of defining and carrying that out. One of those things is to optimize the housing we have. The second is support public housing initiatives. And third, seek out opportunities and build the housing ourselves. About 2 years ago, we identified another target goal for ourselves of adding 600 beds. So we would have approximately 1,200 beds in inventory against those 4,000 employees and change. Again, about a quarter of our workforce we would aspire to provide housing for. So that's our target. We're a little more than half the way there at this point in time. So if that's the target, why Basalt? Why am I here, not in front of some other jurisdiction? One, to repeat what I've said, we're already here. Again, about half of our employees live down valley generally, from sort of mid-valley Basalt area to Carbondale and beyond. I think the exact number is 453 live inside the town of Basalt itself. One of our 2 headquarters buildings is literally catty-corner across the street from you here. We have a presence. We consider Basalt one of our home bases. We already own and operate 2 housing projects in Basalt. The Tiny Homes project at the KOA campground, which Philip undertook and delivered, and the Sopris View apartments are our project. We own those apartments. More particularly, why Willits? Why would we want to develop housing in Willits? One, it's an existing PUD. It's got mixed-use, multifamily buildings already in it. A site is available, and one of the biggest problems or challenges in actually doing affordable housing is finding a place to do it, is literally finding a piece of land. But a site is available in Willits. It's centrally located in the valley, and as was alluded to before, and Bill mentioned it, it's transit-oriented development. And that matters to us. We think it's critical for the employee to be located close as possible to a RAFTA line, and to encourage and incent those people who work for us to use public transit if at all possible. It's almost an intermingled problem that you can't pull apart from housing. That housing study I referred to before noted that people commute up and down the valley in each direction all the time. We think transit is critical to the location of our housing. Services and amenities are located there, whether it's grocery store, drugstores, any of the above, restaurants, movie theaters close by, all of those things. It's comparatively affordable. It's an ideal mix of uses in a walkable community. And the demographics have a broad range of people there. As I said, we believe we have a pretty broad range of demographics in our company, and we think we fit, and that Willits fits us. To us, it seems like not just a good spot for affordable housing, but literally an ideal spot. What are we asking for? We're certainly asking for some modification of applicable code or PUD provisions, including the shifting use of some of the parking components. I think it's also important to note what we are not asking for. Typically, in a development situation, you have a private sector developer come in before a public agency wanting to build for-profit residential. And the public sector requires that developer to build affordable housing to mitigate for their for-profit component. We're not asking for a profit component to subsidize housing in this case. We're here to build affordable housing by itself for its own purposes, not as a requirement for some other use. We're buying private land at market price, using our own capital to build affordable housing. We aren't asking a housing authority to build it for us. We're taking a responsibility to do it. We'd appreciate your help and support in realizing what we believe is a shared goal of adding to the Valley's stock of affordable housing in a mixed-use community that we think is perfectly suited for it. With that, I'll let Philip present in detail.
Great, thanks, David. Thanks, everybody.
Can there's available seats in the front for anyone that's in the public. Just know that if people are starting to back out the door, there are available seats, and if anyone wants to signal a chair that's open, we want to be inclusive to everyone.
Thanks, Jen. Just to piggyback on a couple of concepts David said, the other reason we're in Basalt is because I think Basalt gets affordable housing probably better than anybody in the valley right now. You understand the challenge and you value partnerships. You've shown that in the last few years. You also understand regionalism. I think Jennifer, you've done an incredible job of advocating for the regionalist approach. So I think Basalt gets it. The scale of the problem that we've been talking about is incredibly daunting. The numbers are huge, but often the numbers don't really tell the full story. I'm going to give you a couple examples of kind of how affordable housing really impacts a community on a day-to-day basis. As an example, number one, what does a community look like when it no longer can house its young people? Our kind of pride and joy in Willits is Willits 7, the affordable housing project. The one bedroom in Willits 7, deed restricted, is $1,740 a month. If you did a kind of cost burdened assessment of that you would require close to $70,000 a year to live there. I don't know how many of you made $70K coming out of college or with your first job. I certainly didn't. Our project is trying to do something else. It's another place to start, a place that Basalt currently doesn't have on the ladder. Another question, how housing relates. How does housing affordability actually impact air quality and climate change? Something a lot of people don't think about. People move to places they can afford. That study showed that there were 26,000 commuters in the valley, obviously traveling oftentimes huge distances. We know that the transportation sector accounts for a third of global, for greenhouse gases, and is the fastest growing sector. So it's a huge area. Where we live impacts every aspect of people's lives, including the climate. So what we also know is that study after study that thankfully Basalt has funded and commissioned has shown the problem, unfortunately, is getting worse, and that we do need a new strategy. And I think that strategy really is one that we need more people to get involved, and that's partly why we're here. And interestingly, back in 2017, it was obvious even back in, 2007, when the Basalt Master Plan was put out, that the tools that were available weren't going to get the job done. Your master plan is a call to action. Even back in 2007, it says seek to attract. It says encourage. It says pursue innovative approaches. It says promote voluntary employer participation. It is an invitation to act, and I'm sorry that it took us so long to get here, but thanks for the invitation. We're here we're here with our project. We're here with something for you to consider. So here's our project tonight. I'll try to be quick about it. It's a 100% workforce housing project, 36 units, 148 beds. As we said, it's in a great location in your urban growth boundary. It takes up only a portion of the site. As James mentioned, it's a part of the site is building, part of the site is parking, service parking. The ground floor is, of the 36 units of workforce housing that is the project, 22% of them are deed restricted for the community. Those are 22% of the units are not for the skiing company. These units are here in orange. We can look at those a little bit clearer, more in detail. There are 5 one-bedrooms in that group. They're nice units on the ground floor. There are 2 two-bedrooms. They all meet Bach's guidelines at this point. We've worked with Bach on these. There's a nice 3-bedroom unit. It's 8 units, 12 beds for the community in our project. That is already 100% workforce housing. We're really proud about that. On the upper floors, we get into the larger units. A couple more slides from now, we'll get into those in more detail, so I'll skip them. During P&Z, we worked with staff, and we made a lot of changes to this building, from a facade standpoint, to materials, to the actual layout of the building. Really worked to make it fit in. You can actually see from this view from Pioneer how the building steps backwards in height. This is actually from Reed Street Park. You can see the entrance of our building right here. There's the surface parking. So a nice building that we worked on and were able to get P&Z's approval for. You can see how it relates to the building across the street. It's actually shorter, we'll get into that. Other concerns were access. We added an elevator, we improved access on all sides of the building. We changed the sidewalk dimensions so that it worked well and fit in the guidelines. We did that while maintaining a nice vegetative buffer, which you'll see here. This is a little shot of the building on Robinson. You can see the kind of the quality of the materials, the generous sidewalk, as we mentioned, the buffer between the public sphere and the private sphere. Again, these are the ground floor residential units. You can see that we've got a great separation to really make that distinction. So really nice units. Since I've been working on this project for longer than I can remember, unfortunately, and doing outreach and meeting with neighbors and businesses, I've come up with kind of a list of the most common misunderstood elements of this project. And they range from the size to kind of the impacts on property values. I wanted to run through them quickly with you. Number one, on size. This is a really interesting one. There are 93 units that are approved for this site per the PUD, without asking for anything. Per Basalt's average household size, that's close to 280 people. Our project, of course, is 36 units and 148 people at its maximum. It probably will never get there. You can see here that our building, given its size, has less people, which would probably, sorry, as you can see here, less people, fewer cars, less impacts, has no commercial as proposed, which again is less traffic than what is already approved. This becomes more obvious on this slide. You can see that in Willits, buildings are built lot to lot. You can see our project here. It has the ability, obviously, to go lot to lot per the PUD, per the units that are approved on this site. It's not. It's a small building. It's the most compact building, and it's actually the shortest building that will have ever been built in Basalt, a residential building. It's 5 feet shorter. And we did that also to help preserve views for our neighbors. So it's may not look like it, but this is probably the smallest project that will ever be built if we're not successful on Block 9. That might be hard for neighbors to understand, but the PUD enables this site to be quite massive. So, moving on. Home values, classic concern. Can't have an affordable housing meeting without public concerns regarding their property values. It makes sense. Thankfully, there's been a ton of research on the subject, 20 years plus of data, showing that affordable housing has no impact on adjacent home values. You can see the latest study here from Trulia, property values before a project goes in and those after, there's no impact. There's actually studies showing that there are projects that there are places where it actually has a positive impact. Studies aside, I think we can pretty much agree that in Willits, in our own experience, here's our existing affordable housing project in Willits, and lo and behold, the most expensive project ever to be proposed and being built currently in Willits is right next to it. So I think the argument that affordable housing negatively impacts your home values is not only debunked by national research, but our local kind of experience. Next, heard a lot about this, that our project will only house seasonal employees. That is not the case. This project is being built for a wide range of not only our employees, but Mid-Valley Child Care professionals. Who are our employees? Well, our employees are, as David was mentioning, extremely varied. I mean, we run 4 mountains, 3 hotels, 15 restaurants. I mean, you name an employee, give a title, we've got it. I mean, from front office to back office to cashiers to engineers to supervisors to IT to mechanics, technicians. You got them, you name it, we got it. And they range in all sorts of ages. They all need housing. And this project is extremely important to them. Additionally, the building often is being the 6-bedroom unit that we'll talk about later is kind of the center of attraction. It turns out that 36% of the units in the building are actually 1s and 2s. So, I mean, we've got a lot of variety. We've got 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 6s in this building. So it's a diverse unit type. The 6-bedroom, as we've heard a lot about, is actually is a great unit that was modeled off of projects that we have currently in Snowmass. As you can see, 6 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and that's in its configuration with a common kitchen. But there's storage, there's places to sit, there's hangout areas. That same bedroom, that same unit is just as great as a family unit. And we designed this purposely to be flexible in how it can be used. Because as Bill, who's here, who manages our housing, knows, whenever you need to house someone, you don't have the right unit. So what we tried to do is create the unit that can house anybody. Here it is in its kind of family configuration. You can see how that bedroom, there were 2 bedrooms, now it's an office. You've got kind of a master suite. You can put, with furniture alone, closets. Here, one of them becomes a den. You could create a gear room if you wanted. It turns out this is a 1,500 square foot unit with 6 bedrooms in the roommate configuration. In a other configuration, it's just a 6-room single-family house, which, believe it or not, is the most common size for an American single-family home. So it's like a little compact single-family home. 6 bedrooms is 6 rooms, sorry, is not atypical, though it might sound strange to you. Think of your home, think of how many rooms you have. You'll probably add it up. It adds up to more than you think. So it's a cool unit. Again, the future of the residents, as David mentioned, just look around you. You're probably looking at an ASC employee. They're going to look a lot like who's already here. We had a lot of questions about management. We actually had P&Z come out and visit our units. This is Bernie, who spent a couple hours with the rest of P&Z. He said everything was well maintained and attractive. Buildings look great. He was impressed with the multi-level organizational team that we have. I mean, the P&Z was extremely concerned about management, and they walked away, the issue went away. Up in Snowmass, where we have those bigger units, we have a letter here from the police chief. Again, professional management issues don't spill out from the project. We have been doing this for a long time. This is not our first rodeo. This project in Willits is an evolution of everything we've learned over the past 12 years. It really is our best thinking, and it will be kind of the pride of what we have. Another concern we've heard is that I've seen things that there's a lot of opposition about this project. Granted, with every land use project, you're going to get a room with some people that are upset. That's normal, but we noticed close to 120 people. I mean, there are more neighbors that are like directly adjacent to this than probably anywhere else in Basalt. We have obviously the Basalt Child Care Coalition, big supporters of this project. You see their names here. And the business owners that we've talked to have been very supportive of the project. So a lot of broad-based support. One of the, I think, biggest topics for tonight, and one of the things that you've heard and seen in your letters that you've been receiving, is the perceived parking shortage. We've seen it written about, we've heard about it. I want to say right here now that we agree that there's a parking problem at Willits. We do not agree that it's a parking shortage. We believe that there's a parking opportunity here to adjust the management out here. Willits, and we'll talk more about parking, but Willits was designed, as James mentioned, to have commercial parking on street and residential off street. We have businesses arriving to their storefronts in the morning with all the spaces filled up before they even open their shop. And those cars have been there for days. That's an issue. But that's not a parking shortage. It just means that the way Willits was designed isn't the way it's being managed. And that's totally fine, because Willits has been in transition for the last 16 years, 17 years. Jackie knows how many years. It's been in a transitional phase, but the road, thankfully, is kind of coming to the end, and we'll need to implement. We would recommend, especially if we become neighbors here, that we implement a parking management strategy here that reflects the actual design. So we'll get back to parking as it relates to us, but we agree there's a parking problem here, not a shortage. We've heard things like, doesn't matter what things cost, put a garage, put an underground garage on this. I want to be clear that this is an extremely expensive project. $15 million. We not only have to obviously buy the land, buy the rights, we've got to build not only our building and our parking lot, but we have to build the cause parking lots. We have to build the streets. It's all layered into this cost. This is free market, big time costs. Mentioned on the annual operating budget, again, we think of you as partners in this deal, and this is full transparency. You know, the rents, both from our units and the category 1 and 2 deed restricted units, equate to about $850,000 a year. Expenses including utilities and the free bus passes and the professional management and all that, $450,000. You look at the cost of just paying, putting the $15 million in and never getting it back, just the cost of that money. You're seeing a break-even project. And I think it's important as we talk about the parking later that we don't come up with ideas that potentially could rupture this balance. This is a project that I've been trying to make happen in Basalt for years. The first thing when I started at SKICO, I was like, let's do a project in Willits. It's the best place. And I couldn't make it work financially. I've come to this precarious balance. This is the unit mix. This thing works, but it's precarious if we start messing with it. So I ask that folks to keep in mind that if you added a parking garage, for example, for $3 million, you're actually adding another about $100,000 a year just here to this line here, which of course we'll have to pass to the workers, which is not what we want to do.
Could I just interrupt you just a second? Are you getting close to closing? Because we have so many people here that want to speak. So could you just estimate so that they know about how much longer?
I'd say 10, 15 minutes. Does that work for everybody? I'll be so quick here. We've heard that not every bed matters. There are 4 listings today for homes in Aspen, Basalt, and Carbondale under $2,000. They're right here. So when we add 150 beds, it's a good thing. It matters. Back to the amendments, we're here because, again, you guys know that housing can't happen by itself. You say in your own master plan that you need to revise the town code and develop regulations. So that's a big one. We'll talk about the PUD amendments here quickly. They're all policy changes. We talk about the commercial. There's what's required. These are the signatures of support from the business community saying they would love us not to build more vacant commercial. The unrelated parties. Right now, it's illegal to have one person in one bedroom, 6 people living in 6 different bedrooms, but it's okay to have 6 related people in one bedroom. Your master plan states that the co-housing model should be an acceptable approach. Your municipal code doesn't allow it currently, so there's a disconnect there. We talked about the 4-story building. This is where we started, but we're working with your fire and P&Z and all that. We're here now. It's a shorter, more compact, more efficient building. Parking's a big one, since it's going to be the topic tonight, I guess. As James mentioned, the PUD was designed with the massing and the streets and a bulk of square footage that was approved. Our block had 45 spaces, or has 45 spaces that are allocated to it. Be quick about this. Surprise, surprise, they actually, so 45 on-street spaces are allocated to the commercial development on Block 9. What we're asking for is if you get rid of the commercial, what happens to those parking spaces? Well, we would propose that obviously if you convert the commercial square footage, you should convert the commercial parking that's associated with it. So per the PUD, our project requires 67 spaces, remember that number? We are building a 34-space parking lot rather than, so You got 45 on street, 34 in our parking lot, that's a total of 79. We only need 67. You could theoretically put 34 here and then scatter residential across the streets. We don't think that's a good idea. Hence, we came up with this idea, which is to put 34 there and 33 here. We think that's better for the commercial that's across from us here and better for Willits as a whole. To convert commercial to residential spaces, I'm not a parking expert. We hired the same parking expert that Basalt has been using for years out here. And he did a report, and I want to apologize for James here, but he printed his latest thing for you. We can go into it in detail, but he basically, long story short, says that it's not a big deal. It comes into balance. Everything's about parking balance. We actually are over supplying parking for Takal, but we can talk about it in detail. And then people are like, oh my God, you're taking parking spaces. That's never happened before. It actually has. It's happened. It happens many times. A year and a half ago, you chose to remove parking for a public good by creating Reed Street Park. A year and a half ago, you felt there were enough parking spaces to do that. It's a wonderful amenity. Obviously, Takal has its own parking that we're building for it. That's a public use or a public good. And then back in the day when Basalt wanted a hotel, what did Basalt choose to do? It chose to create a lease with the hotel, no dollars. And this is a public parcel owned by Basalt, 62 spaces exclusively used for the hotel. What we're proposing is nothing really different from that. We think this is a public good. We actually think that our commercial parking, the switch from removing the commercial to going to the on-street residential is a positive for the parking mix. You can read the expert to determine that. We'd go into a similar agreement than you did with the element. And we are proposing that rather than the ordinance drafts, I want to be clear, the draft ordinance that is in front of you, we are good with all of it except for one point, and that's draft ordinance number 18. And we'd like to propose this, which is rather than the 20,000 and then the 100, we would do what we do on all of our projects, which is we charge for parking. We charge $250 a year for a parking pass. In this case, we would take the $250 a year and we'd use that money and give that to the town of Basalt, which totals $16,750, and you use that to work on parking management at Willits. So that's our proposal. Again, we think this is an extremely aligned project, and I'll go quick here. It's obviously aligned with your goals. It turns a problem. Remember, the commercial square footage creates jobs, which creates more employee housing shortages. So we're turning something that creates more shortage into real benefits for the community. We're actually in the same project supporting community initiatives. Our 8 units are real. They're not like a piece of land that, hey, go do this later. This is gonna help Mid-Valley childcare professionals. And we're doing it on a site that, believe it or not, we're building affordable housing on a site that's already had its affordable housing mitigated for it. It's like triple mitigation. It's great. So it's super positive. And again, we're doing this without asking for dollars. So I will leave it at that. You have choices. Tonight, I think we know what the market will do on Block 9. If we don't do this, we don't own Block 9. If we are successful here, we will. Or we can do this.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Okay. So it sounds like the applicant's presentation has come to a close, and it's now time to open the public hearing. It's close to 7 o'clock. We ask that everybody keep their comments to 3 minutes or less. I would love to see this, happen in about an hour, but we will stay till everyone has made their comments. So when you come up, if you could please state your name. Do you want an address or anything, Pam, or just name? Just your name, and just begin. We are dying to hear from you. So a lady in the red blouse in the front. Oh, just kidding.
So they will be timed, right?
Oh, you will be timed, just FYI.
My name's Adam Lidner. I'm a full-time year-round employee with Aspen Skiing Company, and I currently live in employee housing, and I have a degree in pre-medicine and studio art, and I have 2 children. And I would love to live in Willits. I think it's kind of the place to be. And the employee housing is a really excellent opportunity for someone who's like me, kind of in transition in my life. And I couldn't possibly afford to live here in one of the most beautiful places in the world, doing what we do. I get to ski on the weekends, and my children love it here. And I know that they would love this project as well. I'd like to encourage you to permit this, because I'm really excited about it.
Thanks,
So,
Adam.
thank you.
I would ask that anyone who speaks, please sign in on the back form, so that we have your name spelled properly.
Hello.
Hello, Clark Anderson, and I'm going to go because my wife, kind as she is tonight, is agreed to let us use some of our date night to come here to talk to you guys. So I can't
What
I
is
can't
wrong
wait
with
too
you?
long. I work. So I want to just take a couple moments to comment. I work on this issue across the Mountain West. I run a nonprofit organization called Community Builders, and we're focused on trying to create more livable communities, places that are healthy, equitable, and sustainable. I've been doing that for over a decade now. It's what I've committed my time and life to, and I live here in the Valley, and I grew up in Eagle County, so I kind of understand the dynamics around these issues. And I will say that I think this is the most fundamentally challenging issue we face right now. People look at these resort economies that we have, and we're all starting to get this sense that we're slowly losing our soul, right, as we don't address this challenge of how do we keep the characters in our community. We talk about community character sometimes as though it's the type of brick we have on the sides of the buildings or things like this. Character is about the people that live in these places. And as somebody who's watched my hometown be a place that I could never go back to and that my kids would never go back to, I take it very seriously in terms of how do we take bold steps and make the right decisions for the future. This isn't an issue that's going to go away. This is one of the most popular parts of the world, or of the nation, and we need to be very real about the fact that the growth that is coming to the Mountain West is not going to stop, and the demand for housing is something that we need to proactively plan for. You guys have done a really good job for that. So let's look at this particular opportunity that you have. This is an infill site, it's a redevelopment site. So from a sustainability perspective, we do a lot of work around climate change. You could not pick a better place to do this. It's good for land. So when we don't accommodate this demand here, it doesn't go away. It goes somewhere else, usually in a sprawlier location, further away. Philip mentioned the climate change impacts. This is something not many people think about. I actually have done a lot of writing on this and just did a webinar on it about a week ago. Addressing climate change, we cannot do it without tackling transportation emissions. And if you look at the key drivers of transportation emissions, most things are actually going in the right direction. Fuel efficiency, vehicle efficiency, fuel cleanliness. What's not going in the right direction is the way that we're growing. Some of that's about how we sprawl out, but in these economies, in these types of resort regions, the biggest driver of why we're driving farther and farther is because of the lack of affordability near job centers. So every time we send a housing unit further down valley, we are significantly contributing to climate change. So there might be reasons you want to deny this project, but don't do it if you're also telling yourself that you are a proponent of addressing climate change. If you want to advocate for climate change, if you want to promote sustainable development in this valley, and if we want to keep the characters here, this is the right kind of project to do it. Are there hard parts to it? Does it require acceptance of change? Yes, it does, but we live in a place that we have the benefit of being able to take those things on. We're a smart community, we can do this. So I encourage you to approve this.
Thank you.
My name is Brett Suma, and I thought for the most part the presentation was pretty disingenuous in the fact that they started talking about the average age of the workforce, talking about the people that they have that work there, that have worked there for 40 years, that are 60 years old. So I thought that was disingenuous, and this gentleman, one of the very first things he said was that you don't get a return on your investment. And that's really what we're talking about. And the only financial modeling that they showed was that it's gonna have $850,000 of rent, and then they have $450,000 of interest expense. That's assuming that they're actually gonna take a loan out to build it, which I doubt is the case with SKICO. But even if they did, that was a 3% cost of money. The big issue is the parking, right? That's what everybody's concerned about. And so in the paper I read that it would be prohibitive for them to dig and build a garage. And I think the cost was like adding $3 million to the project. I did the math real quick, and that would be $115 additional rent per bed that they would have to charge to fully realize the cost of that over a 30-year period. So it's not unreasonable for them to have to build a garage. They say that there's a problem of parking, but there's not a shortage. Everybody in here knows that there's an issue with parking, and this just will compound that problem. So I think they're being disingenuous in terms of showing what they're showing to you in terms of the cost of the project and their return on the project. And he did mention that they never get the money back, but they own the asset. And so that was disingenuous as well. I think the other thing that's disingenuous about this is we're gonna give them bus passes. And do I think that they'll take the bus to work? Absolutely. Where will their car be all day while they're at work? That's the unintended consequences. If you live in this valley, you have to have a car. Most people have cars. You can go skiing, you can take the bus to go skiing. How many people like to go camping? Do you need a car to go camping? How many people like to go on the river? All of these things, when you look at all of the mountain bikes, the racks, everything, all of that involves having a car. So when I go to Willits at lunch, there's gonna be cars everywhere because they're gonna be on the bus on the way up. So I think that they're being disingenuous in a lot of different ways, and I would really encourage you guys to look at the financial model that they're using to justify it before you say, oh, we can build it without the garage, because the payback at a 3% borrowing rate for them is $115 per person per month. So increase the rent by from $500 to $615 and build a parking garage if you want to be at Willits. Other than that, other than being disingenuous, I think, obviously I think it'll probably get approved, but I would really heavily ask you to look at their financial model as a justification, because he said return on investment. He said we don't get our investment back. So it's an investment. And then the one thing that they also didn't include, which was disingenuous, is they're able to keep their salaries lower by offering this housing. So that was not shown to you in terms of the $850, $450, $450. How much are they saving in their salaries that they're paying by offering housing?
Thanks, Brett.
Hiya.
Good evening.
Hi, I'm Alan Feldman. I have an office in Willits. If you guys want to put a dormitory for the lowest paid people in SKICO and Willits, I guess that's your prerogative. That's fine. What the last gentleman said is absolutely correct. I mean, the reason why they're doing this is so they don't have to pay anybody enough money to live anywhere else. That's my first point. The second point is, all we hear about out of Aspen is how we have to take public transit, how they don't want to have any cars. If that's the case, and this is the biggest employer in Aspen, no parking. You don't need a car. If that's, put your money where your mouth is. If everybody's supposed to take the bus everywhere, and the lowest price employees are supposed to take the bus up to work, then they don't need a car. We don't need parking. Put the money where their mouth is. The third point, this is transient housing. 6 people in a 1,500 square foot apartment? What is that? 200 square feet a person, basically? No one's gonna stay there for any time period. And they're getting $3,000 a month for that unit, if my math is correct. That's a pretty handsome rent for a pretty crappy apartment, right? I rent a really nice house up on the hill there. It's 4 bedrooms. It's nearly 3,000 square feet, and it's about 10% more than that. So this is a huge moneymaker for them. The last gentleman was absolutely correct. Putting the cost of the money in that's not a factor for SKICO. They're paying cash for this, right? I don't know. The last point is, the people that are gonna be living in in these apartments, for the most part, aren't paid enough to shop anywhere in Willits. They're not gonna be spending $14 a pound for chicken salad at Whole Foods, okay? Right? They're not gonna go to Mezzaluna for dinner. Look, I'm all for housing, okay? Let's just make sure it fits, right? The way I see this is it's nothing more than a dorm room for transient, underpaid Aspen Ski Co. employees. Not employees all over the valley. People who work in Aspen, and for the most part, it's waitresses and waiters and lift tops and the younger people. It's gonna be a dorm room, okay? If that's what you guys want, okay. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but just realize that that's what you're gonna get, okay? Thank you so much. Hey, Jeff.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Adam Cooper, and I'd like to begin by thanking the Basalt Town Council for allowing me this opportunity to voice my concerns over Aspen Ski Company's Willits Workforce Housing Project. My concerns stem from looking at Ski Co's past in creating and developing housing opportunities within the valley. Looking back to 2008, Ski Co involved themselves in the Keter Grove development located in Carbondale. As one of the first buyers in this development, I was told that by Ski Co that the homes would be available for members of the community working at Ski Co, the schools, the hospitals, and other local entities. The deed restrictions and covenants were constructed, and it was written into the bylaws that the units were to be owner-occupied. Fast forward to 2010, Ski Co had drawn up new bylaws which exempt themselves from being owner-occupied and allowed them to rent their units to whomever. They had the town sign off on it. Ski Co has since adopted an investment strategy regarding their ownerships of the properties at Keter Grove with the sole intent of renting their units out to sustain profits. This not only violates terms set forth by the original governing documents, but also ignores the intent of the project, which again was to provide home buying opportunities and growth in the community. As Basalt ponders on how to develop their own growth and tries to address housing needs within the community, let me remind those of Ski Co's history in this arena, provide examples of their true intent. My wife and I have been trying to sell our unit in Keter Grove for 10 years, but the problem with our unit is considered unwarrantable by every lender out there, and that's because Ski Co owns greater than 10% of the condominiums. This situation was created by Ski Co when they abandoned trying to sell the units to members in the community and adopted an investment strategy focused on profits for their investors. Countless attempts and avenues have been pursued by myself, real estate agents, lenders, and attorneys, all trying to get Ski Co to respond and correct the problems that they had created over the years, but to no avail. In fact, they refuse to acknowledge any of my communications. Ski Co's actions have demonstrated their concerns are not of the community's needs, but to their interests of their investors. Why would we want to involve them in directing and driving efforts made by the voters to provide more stable and long-term housing opportunities in this community? They've clearly missed the mark in Carbondale. I would warn and recommend that those involved in this project look hard and long at how Ski Co intends to use these properties and what consequences may arise in different economic environments. At the very least, they should be made accountable for the unfavorable housing conditions that they created in Carbondale before entering into new ventures. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Don Schuster. And I still am associated with the Aspen Skiing Company, although I'm retiring on May 31st. So, but I am one of those people that David's talking about. I'm selling my house in Hearthstone, and I had two of my kids that are still living with me that are now being displaced, and they're looking for places to live within this valley. You know, Rick Stevens and others I know have had that similar kind of situation. So this is a real need overall from this. You know, we talk about who's going to, go into this. I was involved, as some of you know, with Bach at one time, trying to figure out what else we could do in this valley. You know, we bought the campground. we put a lot of money in there to get the, tiny homes in there. I was involved with building Club Commons 1, Club Commons 2, the people that are living there and so forth. Not all of these people have a car, trust me, from that. And, before, we have a letter in there from the police chief now. Art Smythe was a resident of Basalt that was a police chief prior to that. He and I had, worked out things early on and made sure that this wasn't, an eyesore to the community and any issues from an emergency services standpoint from this community. People have talked about a return on investment. There is no return on this thing, and there won't be. If there was a return on this, someone else would be coming into this community already. The only thing that we've really seen, real America, how did it get financed? With governmental financing, federal government loans, et cetera, to get something into this. I'm just telling you, as I leave this company, there isn't a return on this employee housing. And to have somebody to come forward and actually want to do this without any subsidies is an amazing opportunity for the town. Thanks.
Thanks, Don.
Hi, I'm Carol Hawk. I live in Willits. I've been there 20 years.
Hi, Carol.
Hi. I just want to say I didn't get one of those notices that you sent out because I would have loved to have known about it before I had to read about it in the paper. I support affordable housing. I think it's the right place. I think density is what is supposed to be there. I don't know that it's as affordable as they're making it out to be with these tiny little rooms. And I'd love to ask Adam, but I think he left, if his wife and 2 children would want to have 2 other roommates in one of those 6-bedroom units. And of course, the big thing is parking. Parking's huge. I think Chief Knott knows that we have several cars that move around the neighborhood that are full, just like little storage units. And every 72 hours, if they move, they can continue to store their car and all their stuff on our streets in front of our houses. So parking is huge. And I think that we have to have off-street parking for everyone that's going to have a car. And I hate to take spaces away from Takaw. I'm not quite sure how the Pioneer Street thing works, but I'll keep looking at it. And overnight parking has always been an issue too. When we have snow and cars don't have to move, they have to plow around these cars. And then it's a cluster. So I just think we really need to think about a lot of things before this goes forward. But again, I do support affordable housing, and it is the right place for it. So.
Thanks, Carol.
I forgot to make a point. Is it possible to amend or not?
Could you do this one thing? Let everybody who hasn't spoken go first, and then you can.
Fair enough.
I know.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Hey, my name is Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan. Last name?
Baloo. Jonathan Baloo. I'm a full-time year-round employee with SKICO. That was not always the case. I moved here 20 years ago as a I guess it would be a transient, poor, transient, underpaid SKICO recruit who was a cultural suck on the community. No, I'm kidding. That's actually not quite true. I moved here as a ski instructor, very fully qualified in 2 countries. I was recruited to work in training at Buttermilk and paid, honestly, one of the highest paid ski instructors in North America, anywhere outside of France, actually. That being the case, being very highly qualified and in the most highly paid position in the US, I still could not afford to live in the town that I worked without living in SKICO housing for a couple of years. If I hadn't had the opportunity to live in SKICO housing, I would have left. My other plan was to go to Austria, then move to France and pursue skiing around the world. But without that opportunity of 2 years of living in housing, which while living there at a reasonable rate, which was not dissimilar to the rates that we're talking about here, I did buy overpriced macaroni and chicken salad at local groceries. I did eat regularly at Mezzaluna. I did eat out and contribute to the community. I did volunteer my time with AVSC. I did volunteer my time with disabled veterans and with Shining Stars. So I was able to be a participant in the community because my housing was at a lower rate until I could figure out whether this was a valley I wanted to live in and participate in. After that period of time of a couple of years, I decided this was a place I wanted to make my home, and 20 years later, my wife and I are living here, and I run the ski and snowboard schools, which I never thought I'd be able to do. But without that opportunity, that wouldn't have happened. So while there is some transient component to what happens, and that's just the nature of resort communities, it doesn't matter which part of this valley you're in or which resort you're in, that's there. But if we want to do what this gentleman said before, I can't remember his name, he's sitting right here, about keeping characters in the valley, which also means not just the ones who are here right now, but the ones who will come here and be here. We have to create some opportunities for them to be here for a period of time to figure out if this was the right place for them, if they can integrate, and then give them the affordable period of time so that they can integrate and hopefully find their way. So I encourage this to happen. I've had nothing but positive experiences, and as one of the departments that's one of the largest employers in the valley, we employ 1,500 people who live between Rifle and here, and I'd like more of them closer if possible. I really encourage this, and I didn't have a car for my first 6 years being here.
Thanks, Jonathan, right? Thank you. Good timing. Others?
Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Guy Pisano and I live in Willits.
Hi, Guy.
I'll tell you, this is a interesting situation. David and Philip did a really professional presentation. I'm a novice, so I'll do my best to give you my points of view. One thing I don't hear being addressed by them is their definition of seasonal workers. If we're going to put people in this situation of about 200 square foot per person, are they going to be long-term? Are they going to really get housing to live in this valley? Are they going to work 3 months and leave? How many seasonal workers? I don't hear it in the presentation. It might only be a handful, but I think it's an important point. If we want to give this project a green light, I want it to be long-term housing for people that can live here and stay here and not have to leave at the end of a ski season or at the end of the summer. Or where do they go? It's just another problem. Where do they go when there's no? So that is a key thing for me. 148 bedrooms, 36 units. You guys can think about that. So seasonal workers, the other thing is this 1,600, we need underground parking. If we're going to have a project of this size, it's there. If they're going to have to raise the rents $100 a person per month, it's a possibility. Then they can pay those people a little bit more so they can afford that rent. Well, I think that's all I got on my notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy.
Mhm.
Hi. Hello, how are you? Good. My name is Maria Jose Wilkening. I'm from Chile. I'm a full-time year-round employee. I have a graphic design degree, and I'm a retail manager over in Snowmass. I came with a J1 visa a few years ago. I had the opportunity to meet my husband, and currently we live in the tiny homes. Aspen Skiing Company housing has been really helpful for me. I live in the Club Commons there, meanwhile I was doing seasonal work. We had the opportunity to get a unit here in the tiny homes, which has been amazing for me to be able to know a community, especially coming from another country. So now my doctor's here, the vet is here, everything is around town. I live in the tiny homes project. It's been amazing. It's only my husband and I, even there's 3 bedrooms. But again, the commute, it's amazing. I used to work in Aspen last winter, so I commute in the bus all the time. I only had to walk 3 minutes to the bus, which is awesome. And I fully support this project. I think the tiny homes has been great. And as a long-term employee, I would like to see my family grow in affordable housing. Starting from zero, it's hard to come up with first, last, and security deposit. I spent a lot of money in my green card, and my husband and I, we've been married only 2 years, so it's hard to come up with a lot of money to spend every month and to kind of build a family. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Could you say your first name again?
Maria Jose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone else?
Hello, I'm Michael Miners. I live in Soper's Village, across Willets Lane from this proposal. You know, as I listened and watched this presentation, there's a lot of positive things about this. I'm here tonight because of my concerns about the density for 6 unrelated people in a unit, and not only that, that they would be seasonal type employees. This is something that, as a community, we struggle with. Bandit units, overpopulation, enforcement is really difficult. You can't get somebody to go and check on how many unrelated people live in a home. I realize that they're offering that they'll have on-site management. It all sounds good in the beginning. As time goes by, things tend to slip. I think that if you are to approve a change to your town code, or at least grant them a variance to your town code for this type of density, you're going to be revisiting this over and over again as other properties want to come online and change the number of unrelated people, the amount of allowable square footage per person. I think that it's a real concern for the entire Mid-Valley, not just the Willets or the town of Basalt. One thing that strikes me when I listen to people talk about greenhouse gases and commuting and stuff, and the obvious thing to me is that the city of Aspen and Pitkin County are planning for long-term major growth. New city and county buildings, new airports, expansions to ski areas, reservoirs, and they don't provide housing, and they don't provide traffic mitigation, and they don't provide parking. So where's that supposed to go? It's being pushed down valley because it's undesirable or unobtainable in Aspen. And I think that the town of Basalt, I would hope, can take the lead and establish some type of, I don't want to use the word protection, but some type of community benefit for the entire Mid-Valley, not just the town of Basalt. I don't want to be on my crutches in my dying days in 20 years going, boy, I wish someone had paid attention when they started doing this. You know, this application, in my mind, belongs before the city of Aspen, town council, not the town of Basalt. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Hi, I'm Rich Grant.
Hello, Mr. Grant.
I think this is a really nice project, and for all the reasons they gave as climate change and all these things, it is a great project for Aspen, for Snowmass, for the Upper Roaring Fork Valley. We understand years ago that Pitkin County and Aspen both have broken their arms, patting themselves on the back by managing growth. But other people have pointed out they've managed to keep low growth in housing, but they haven't kept low growth in job opportunities. So if they want a low growth, they ought to do both or do neither. So move this project up valley. It's great. I like it. We don't have to have the taxpayers of Basalt pay for their bus system to get their employees to work. We don't have to have the town of Basalt to support their child care for their people who they could do it up there. Why does Basalt have to fund the employees for the employers up valley? We've done that for many years. People that have been here, a lot of people have heard Barbara O'Toole come down and talk about raising property taxes. Well, yeah, if you've lived here for 50 years, 100 years, generations, then these property taxes keep going up to pay for what the employers up valley should be paying. And I don't understand why we have to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Grant. We'll just wait for you to come up.
Doug Grant.
Hi, Doug.
I'm concerned with the town missing something here that might be even more than make Tabor look like a bump in the road. We're converting commercial space at breakneck speed for residential. Bristlecombe Sports, Picton County offices, ski company offices are taking up commercial. Now we're converting buildings in Willits from commercial retail. We're losing retail space for residents. And you're here for what's good for the town. Residential doesn't pay for itself. It has to have a commercial part, and there's a balance there. So I don't want you to slowly not realize that we're giving up commercial and retail space for residential and put us at a disadvantage financially. I don't think all the studies and everything about growth in Picton County are accurate. Every time we turn around, the ski company's opening more terrain, putting in a zip line, looking to go full round summer, putting in honey huts or huts on their ski hill. Picton County's doing more trails everywhere, and there's no housing. Each one of those things, when they do a trail or a zip line, requires another body. They put in monster homes up there at a slow pace, but no employee housing. Each one of those monster homes, we know, takes an average of 5 people to maintain. Even if the resident isn't here, it takes 5 people. So I'm saying the growth projections, or the growth that's saying 1.4% a year shows what the job creation is, but there's no housing. Where are the employee housing up there? And what little bit they've done in subsidized or public housing is not even close. So I think the new strategy here ought to be, which they mentioned in their report, is to look to the Aspen community, Snowmass and Ski-Co, to provide, if they're going to keep creating jobs, to provide housing. Now, at one point when Snowmass Village was being built, Wildcat was proposed to be a city about the same size as Snowmass Village. Wildcat is 1,000 acres. Wildcat is secluded. They can hide all of us worker bees in there. And I think it's time, there's lots of land that can be developed in the Upper Valley and has been proposed for years, that the employee housing needs to be up there, not pushed down here on us. Their presentation says we need 500 housing units in Basalt. Then what we create from day one forward, from this day forward, should be 500 housing units for the people that live and work in Basalt. I think it's time that we can take care of ourselves, we can be more sufficient. We've been balanced here for a long time, and we've been good at telling the Aspen community to, no, we don't want you to keep encroaching on us. It's like a humongous fungus among us. They need to continue, if they want to grow and make jobs and make money faster, then they need to not put all of the liability or the costs on us. They should share that up there in some way. And there's plenty of places to do it in the Aspen-Picton County area right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Grant. Okay, it is a public hearing, so we want to get your comments on the record, everybody who's thinking about it.
Ellen Weinstein, and I live in Willits, and I actually moved down several years ago from up the valley. There were comments at the P&Z meeting disparaging some of the people who might live in this situation, employees. I don't think that's the issue. I'm supportive of affordable and workforce housing. Again, I'm concerned about the density. I was told at the P&C meeting there were comments that the 6 people in 7 by 10-foot rooms live unrelated, that would appeal to long-term employees. I don't believe that is the case, whether you call it a dorm style or whatever. And we cited the demographics of people over 60. I happen to be part of an over 60 demographic. I can tell you, I don't know one person in my demographic who would want to live like that. And so I think the problem is not so much the project itself, but amending the code to, for the variation. I also do think parking is an issue. A lot of these people will have cars. It is fine to take the bus to work, to commute. I take the bus up to Aspen if I'm doing something there. A lot of people are not going to want to come home from work and tote bundles from City Market. They're not all going to have fat tire bicycles for when there's a foot of snow. As somebody else said, they need a car. And so the other issue, I believe, is the parking. And to go along with what somebody else said, there are a lot of people in our own community, work in the community. There were people displaced from Pan and Fork. There are people who need housing, and that should be part of our affordable and workforce housing that we address.
Thank you very much. Next person.
Aaron Ward, I live in Willits.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi. My biggest issue with this is the parking. With the on-site parking currently being in the plan, the 34 spaces, with the Basalt code, that would allow for 17 two-bedroom units. Actually less than that if you consider there's guest parking, a 25% guest parking, so probably more like 15 two-bedroom units. That has an implication of 30 people living there and 30 cars. This has the potential of having 148 licensed car owners who live in this. It's an unproven product here in the Valley. It's not a new product in other high rent markets such as San Francisco and Manhattan, where REITs are getting heavily involved in the dorm style because it's so profitable, because rent, when you jam people into a smaller space, as somebody else touched on, the rent per square foot is about as high as it gets in Willits for those 6-bedroom units. The 1,500 square foot, $3,000 a month. The principle of substitution would say that I wouldn't see a family wanting to spend that $3,000 for 1,500 square feet when they could get a single family residence in Willits that has 2,800 square feet for the same amount. So I think that's a little disingenuous and just not a reality of what's going to happen. So my main concern is the 148 people, young people, living there who own cars. And where those cars are going to go is going to cause a lot of problems for the Willits Town Center. And just to reiterate, I mean, it's just with the current code, which during the last P&Z meeting, we had somebody on the phone speak about different studies. I'm sure our own code in the 1.5 parking spaces per 1 bedroom, 2 per every 2 bedroom, that's backed in some studies as well, and good. And there's an assumption of families with some of those as well, whereas there's really no practicality of families living in this space. So it could be up to 148 cars with 33, 34 parking spaces, which I think is going to create a real problem.
Thank you.
Evening all, Simon from Willits. I'm not against the project. I went to the P&Z meetings originally. I had lots of issues, but they kept improving, and I actually liked many of the improvements you made and appreciate that. But there's still a couple of issues. One comment I want to make is that many of us in this room in the Valley, we're all small business employers. We just pay our employees more to be able to stay here. We don't pay them minimum wage and then charge them $500 a month for rent. That's just a comment. Not against the project though. What I am against is them compounding current problems that we're already experiencing in Willits, which is the parking. So I would like to see them do the underground parking, and if that means charging an extra $50 or $100 a month for rent, then on top of $500, it's not really a big issue. And then the other thing is, I feel like they're trying to hoodwink people a little bit and talking about the demographics of their employees. when we all know that this type of apartment, like it's already been said, is not going to attract families, older people. It's for the younger people that would actually enjoy that dorm style living, which again is fine if they want to do that. I'm not against it. Just be honest about it, change the parking, and then we're good to go.
Thanks, Simon. Anybody still want to talk? One more?
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, if nobody else wants to talk, we'll let him go for one more, okay.
Dan Grant, Homestead. I guess 2 areas is the parking, of course, everybody's mentioned, and then the unrelated residents there in the unit. I guess the one study that's going around now, the way I look at that study is that it's just a way to create a district for everyone having to pony up more tax monies to do something about our housing problem, or be able to get loans from the government to help solve our problem that we've created. I guess rather than just being facetious, maybe a little bit, or actually on point, I haven't found a project yet that government doesn't think they can solve easier and more efficient than anything else. And so one thing I see in the project with the unrelated people there, maybe you could, instead of taking all their money for the parking, if that goes through, is maybe get one of those 6-bedroom units and make it for a problem that you people have talked about in the past, about the homeless. Maybe you could turn it into a 6-bedroom homeless unit, and therefore maybe the taxpayers of Basalt won't have to subsidize some homeless unit in the future. So maybe killing 2 birds with one stone there. And there again, those 6 individuals probably would not have a car since they're homeless. So just think about that, maybe 2 birds, 1 stone.
Thanks, Mr. Grant. Okay, anybody who hasn't spoken that wants to, otherwise I'm going to give this gentleman 1 more minute. Anybody? Anybody? Okay. Do you think you could keep it to 1 more minute?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I don't have much to say anyway. I think we ought to think about, and I don't know how to get the answer, hopefully you do, what this project, with 148 more people in that area, what's it going to mean on our police, our fire, ambulance, parks, recreation, so on and so on, that my tax dollars are supporting now. Being that this project most likely will get special tax treatment because it's for affordable housing. So they'll most likely be taxed less than a free market property would be. So I already got my assessment. I'm paying more taxes next year. And I think that that's something we should look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, last call. Okay, actually, did you already talk once?
I talked once.
Give him 1 more minute.
Why don't you have 1 more minute?
Sure.
to-
I just have one quick thought. I just thought about the parking garage on 9th Street in Glenwood Springs. It's not underground. There's a ramp that takes you up to the upper floor, and you may be able to accommodate more parking in the current parking that you have by just going up higher rather than the expense. I think it would be a lot more expensive to build it under the building.
Okay, thank you very much. Going, gone. We're going to close the public hearing at 7:45, and does staff have anything more to say?
I just wanted, you didn't enter into the record the additional comments, did you? Just to kind of note that we received a number of emails since we sent out the packet, and we made copies of those, and you have them in front of your.
Right,
and I'm entering it officially into the public record.
Okay. Well, we have some time to take some comments from council, so I'd say.
And, no, but just to kind of remind people that what we were, Jeff was just talking to me, but just to remind that how we set up this meeting is kind of an introductory meeting, so we were looking for you to identify any additional questions that you have for the next meeting. We were looking for any initial thoughts that you had, and then we were looking at the end for a motion to continue to May 28th. Is that all we should add, James?
Yes, correct.
Okay, well, I can go. I think it's pretty obvious what the really big concerns are. It's definitely parking. I'm hearing people that have concerns about the 6 unrelated people in a unit. I heard comments about losing all forms of commercial in the building, and I share all those concerns. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm not moved by large numbers of people coming at me for or against. I had these thoughts already, despite the fact that there is a lot of people that share those concerns. I think that SKICO should run the numbers again on the underground parking, because I think that that is something that I'm gonna wanna see. Everyone else has been able to do off-street for residential. I say make that happen. On the 6 unrelated, I hate to use that word disingenuous, because I don't believe that there was disingenuous in the presentation, but the reality is this will not be affordable housing for the community of workers in Basalt, for the most part, although there are some SKICO employees that do work in Basalt. It is company housing for the SKICO for the most part. So what I would really like to see is just some conformance with the normal character of Willits, and maybe regroup and try to look at 1 to 4 bedroom units that are normal sized, with normal sized bedrooms and normal sized living spaces, to be more in character with the existing neighborhoods. I know Willits feels like they get a lot dumped on them because it's big and it still has more to grow, obviously. But I think that although we're gonna see that growth because the approvals have been there for many, many years, I don't think we need to necessarily get way out of compliance with the existing character. I understand the concerns there, and I think our job up here is to work for our community as a whole and not for an individual business. And for me, that means if we're gonna have affordable housing, let's have it look like something that if something doesn't work out in 20, 30, 40 years down the road, we have a product that still works for this community. And this does not work for most communities. This 200 square feet per person thing doesn't work for me. So that's my thoughts on it. I don't really need any further information. I think I've heard between the packet and from staff all the information I need. Others?
Questions that I have, and I would like included in our next discussion that I already asked of staff, the maximum monthly rents for affordable housing categories 1 and 2. This was provided to us by James. I'd like it to continue with the packet so that we can use it as a reference point. Another item that I'd like to learn from staff is the 2017-2018 Willits PUD update. The square foot transformation of commercial to residential that we already granted. This council has been faced with a lot of residential approval. We have approved an astounding number of residential, and I'm very aware of transforming residential to, or excuse me, commercial to residential and the future financial implications. So from that, it was already mentioned in the packet that it would be a loss of $27,000 a year in sales tax of the square footage that is approved for this Lot 9. With that said, just to put it out to SKICO, you do, as you mentioned, have so many staff, you can name every single kind. You all already have a retail. So it could be a retail, easily. I recognize it's affordable housing, but what is also very important for me as a leader for this town, I'm really concerned about that loss of $27,000 per year in sales tax. That's our future. Another item to consider that I asked staff about is with the parking lease amount, I'd like it to include maintenance and snow removal costs. I heard that it's possibly proposed that SKICO would maintain and do the snow removal. If that's the case, please describe to me what other properties you do snow removal at in the Mid-Valley and what machinery you do have available and how you deal with, so this is an issue of why the town is selling Shining Mountain properties in Old Snowmass is it takes 20 minutes for the snowplow truck to drive from Basalt to go there and plow, and then another 20 minutes for it to come back. So if you don't have the equipment locally, I see that as an issue. Another concern is looking at the 6 unrelated people in the units. I share Chief Knott's concern about private and safe cold food storage. If there's going to be 6 people sharing one refrigerator, that kind of just sounds really challenging. In college, I had a tiny little refrigerator in my dorm room. Okay. All right. And from that, if you can report to us in your Snowmass Commons projects, how many people, unrelated people per unit you currently have? What's the maximum number? With that as well, I'm under the impression that there is outdoor space required per residential square foot, and I don't see where that is on this plan. Okay, so if you could bring that up. And then as well, if the applicant can provide data from Snowmass Village emergency medical and fire calls, the percentage of total calls in Snowmass Village, the number that go to the club commons. And then I'm getting close to the bottom here. And then another question is history of Aspen Ski Company proposals up Valley for a housing, and a very, very brief bullet point history of what has been proposed, what's been approved, what's failed, and for us to really consider. And then as well, I heard the question from the audience that I do have the same question, just for my education, is this project taxed the same residential rate as other multifamily, single-family homes?
Is that good?
I don't know if I did this last one. And then one more is the 2017-2018, maybe I started with this, the Willits PUD update, the square foot transformation of commercial to residential. Yeah, I did that. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
I want to thank you guys for bringing this to us. It's very interesting. I think you hit on one of the problems, even in your presentation, that we don't really talk about in the Valley. Yeah, we have a housing problem, but we also have a wage problem, and a couple of the people spoke to that. And I think it's very true, not for just you guys, but for everyone involved, is we use this quote of affordable housing, and you said, you know, out of college, you don't make 70K. I don't think there's an abundance of jobs that are 70K, even to afford the other rent-controlled units. So it's just a general statement that we do have an affordable housing problem, but we also have a wage problem across the Valley, and it's something that we need to address. I think many people brought up the parking situation. I think the one gentleman that spoke to, 148 individual people living in this building, there is a possibility that there are 148 cars. You've brought up some things. I think the underground parking is probably the best answer. And
yeah, I just think another statement that you made is that, you know, your building's 5 foot shorter and that the PUD allows 93 units. What about maximizing the use of this space and putting more on it? If you did the underground parking, could you build another building that's affordable housing for the general population of the valley instead of, you know, you are doing a great job of offering 8 units for childcare, which I'm very passionate about and I know we need, but what about more units for other businesses? This obviously addresses a lot of your needs, but there's also greater community needs that need to be addressed too.
Thanks, Ryan.
She had her hand up? No?
I'll go if.
Sure,
You
go.
go first?
Go, Katie, go.
So I think that this project has brought up a lot of interesting concerns as the public comment hit on, like the conversations that potentially need to be happening up in Aspen in terms of their affordable housing problem has become our affordable housing problem, which hits on the climate change problem because we have people in cars more than ever instead of just hopping on a free bus up in Aspen. I appreciate quite a few things about this project. One being that there isn't an ask for direct government funding. It's not a development exaction, and it's also transit oriented. So those are all three great, stellar components of this project. One of the things that jumped out at me in our packet was the letter from RAFTA. I'm not sure if you guys have had time to really dig into that letter, but it basically throws up this red flag of RAFTA doesn't have the capacity to meet not just this project, but all of the approved and unbuilt. What are we gonna do about that? Because we're talking about RAFTA is the solution to to this parking traffic problem. And RAFTA has outlined in a page and a half that they cannot meet these demands. What are we gonna do? That's my major concern with not just this project, but as we continue to develop more and more and more. I ride the bus every single day. I basically live without a car and I work in Aspen. I stand on the side of Highway 82 and watch the gazillions of cars that are flying up to Aspen. Oftentimes, they are one person in the car. And oftentimes, the buses are packed. I love it when our buses are packed because we're moving towards what I think is a goal of our valley. And oftentimes, it's packed with SkiCo employees, and that makes me really, really happy. But what are we gonna do when we have another 150 potential SkiCo employees on our buses and RAFTA is saying that they're not the panacea? So I'm encouraging SkiCo to talk with RAFTA about this particular project. And I guess we need to have more in-depth conversations as an organization with RAFTA, and the city of Aspen needs to talk to RAFTA because we need more buses if we're gonna keep building as we seem to continue to do. So that's one of, I think that's like my major concern. I'm not committed to pushing for an underground parking garage. I'm committed to pushing, let's just find a way to have fewer cars. Again, that's tied to RAFTA, but I want to find a way where we have a bunch of shared vehicles. And there seems to be a movement throughout the entire country to eliminate cars. Let's do it. Millennials seem to be committed to that. Let's find a way to do it. I know that there was a comment that people like to camp. I get that. I like to camp too. I still live without a car, at least 5 to 6 days out of the week. The other thing is with this parking option, there is the car share. I'm concerned that the car share may never happen. So I would encourage SkiCo to actually generate their own car share program. And I would, depending on the number of where we land with the number of units and the people, more than 2 cars. I think we should have at least 5 car share cars there just for this proposal. You have made big strides towards making this project energy efficient. I appreciate that this project is mostly all electric from what I read. At least the heating system's all electric. I'm assuming no AC. Will it be all electric? Excellent, thank you, thank you. With that, are you contemplating solar?
Of course.
Thank you. Okay, so I think solar would be an excellent, especially since you're moving towards an entirely electrified building. And that'd be interesting to see all those numbers in terms of like the CO2 that you're actually reducing based on having an electrified project for 150 people. You touch on recycling, but one of the big things that we know that we need to do is composting is actually more of an important element in terms of ecological and CO2. So finding a way that this project would have composting. And then finally, and this may be a bit outside of this development application, but I believe you have a significant parcel over on South Side, and talking about can that be modified into some type of community serving project, potentially, I don't know what it could be, extinguishing development.
A park? A garden?
Over in South Side,
You're selling it, or it's for sale.
they're both for sale.
No, we have two parcels. Sorry.
Yeah,
You-
both
oh,
of them,
sorry, just
all
wanted-
of them.
Okay, so just wanted, if you had we're speaking specifically to one of them.
No, just knowing that this is gonna be a big addition to our community and a lot of CO2 and a lot of cars, and which I hope it's not all of those things, but, and again, this is outside of this development application, but figuring out what could happen over there. That would be community serving, offsetting carbon, solar array,
Got the money.
just some ideas.
Anything else?
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Katie.
Give us the
Hey,
puppy,
Gary.
Gary.
Give you the puppy?
Give us the puppy. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I mean, when I looked at this project, when I first saw that it was coming through, you know, the reality is this was approved. They can come in tomorrow and build units on this property without coming into town council at all to change anything. So to me, the amount of density that can be put on this parcel is pretty large. And that's what we approved. And that's what approved and ready to be built. And so watching it change to something that could be potentially, you know, something that the community supports. I was part of that 2007 master plan when we try to put things in there to encourage different types of affordable housing and trying to encourage private partnerships to do affordable housing. And, you know, these are the type of things that we wanted to see. And so, you know, the housing component, I'm supportive of. And, you know, the reality with the commercial is, you know, I know we've been cutting away at the commercial at Willits, but it's basically because of demand. There's still 46% of Willits that does not have anything commercial in it. So, you know, why keep on pushing that as the future of Basalt when honestly they can come in tomorrow and just kind of start building lots of units here. So, you know, the affordable housing part is I'm very supportive of. You know, I do like it. It's on the transit-oriented development. I was really bummed to see Rafta's letter, and thank you for bringing it up, because I thought we just approved a tax, and there's a lot of things in that tax that are not transit-oriented really, like trails for Glenwood and stuff. And I'm kind of bummed that we approved this, but then they're telling us that they're not going to be able to meet capacity of the actual bus riders that need to get into there. So I think we do need to have a conversation with RAFTA, and we need to have a conversation with the city of Aspen on RAFTA, because that to me was, I read that letter and I'm like, you gotta be joking. I'm like, no, we just approved a pretty large tax increase and they can't handle our capacity. I was really bummed that they had concerns about this one project on that. And so I'm hoping they can go to Garfield County and to other places and tell Eagle County and Garfield County to start limiting the development, because I didn't see that in development approvals in other places, so I was kind of bummed to see it here. But anyway, parking, how do we do this? I mean, I saw in the piece that you're producing a certain amount of spots, and I do kind of look at this going, the reality, I would love to find ways to get people out of their cars, but people are still gonna own cars, and where do you put them? And that's a big question, because even if they don't use them during the week, they're gonna put them somewhere, and, you know, maybe not all 148 people have cars, but if even the ones that we say 67 have cars, you know, how do we put them in a way that does not take away from Willits? I think Willits has a parking problem in the fact that I have seen that when I go early in the morning and there's already cars lined up in front of El Corrida, and I'm like, they're not open. How come there's cars there? And so I have friends who live in Willits, and they're like, yeah, you know, it's not necessarily all the businesses that are parking around there. And so we do have this parking issue that I want to solve in Willits, but I don't want this to compound that problem. I don't want this to then have all of these people parking all over Willits. So I really do think we need to come up with a solution on it. I'd like to see, you know, some options looked upon. You know, I'm not wedded to an underground parking garage as the solution, but I do believe that the people that spoke tonight about the parking issue do have a really good point, because Willits, you know, once the property next to you, Stedman, builds and they're done, you know, the rental units are almost finished. Taka's gonna be built one day, and, you know, with all of these in here and all the extra people, hopefully the commercial units that aren't rented out right now will be rented out in the future. So all of those people, yeah, I would love to think they're all gonna come by bus, but they're not. I mean, the reality is they're gonna be coming by car. And, you know, I'll be honest that I'd love to say I take the bus to go get my groceries, but I don't. I take the car. I drive from this part of Basalt to that part of Basalt with a car for Willits and all that, and so most people do. So we gotta be able to solve this parking issue. And so, one of the things I also wanted to say is that you guys never said that you actually own a retail store already in Basalt. It's right next to City Market, and you guys are paying commercial taxes to the town of Basalt. Even though it's not a retail spot where sales taxes, there's still commercial taxes being paid in that office building there. So that's why I'm not too concerned about the change from commercial to residential here. And I'm just worried that if we can't find a solution, solve the parking issue, if we don't make this happen, we're just gonna see another big block come in, and is that really the answer that we've all been looking for? So, on that, I mean, if we can really deal with this RAFTA issue and the parking issue, for me, those are gonna be the big things that can really sway which way I wanna go on this, because, I mean, people do have a really good point on that, and I wanna really flesh that out.
Any other council last warning? Okay,
I'll make a motion to continue to,
please.
motion to continue to May 28th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're partying again on the 28th. Is the next one executive session? I gotta take
Yes, I am going to recuse myself from the next two items, 7A and 7B, and I will be departing the meeting because there's no
Our next item is an executive session for the purpose of discussing purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of property interests in accordance with CRS 24640224A, more specifically, the sale of the Shining Mountain Way properties. Is there a motion?
Mayor,
Before you actually vote on the motion, though, I want to say something before we go into executive session.
And if I could make one comment also before there's a motion, I just want to note for the record that,
Oh, is that off? It's on.
No.
it's on. That Jen Riffle expressed that she had a conflict and has recused herself and left the meeting, so she's no
Right.
longer here. But Susan, did you have any comments before
Well,
a motion?
James was just saying, and I just didn't want to go into executive session because we can only talk about executive stuff in executive session. Doug Grant wants to hang around after the meeting and after we do this item in the exec section followed by the other because he wants to make another comment. So, James, you were the one that just
We'll
came
have
up.
public hearing at the next meeting
Yeah.
Yeah. as well.
Well, he didn't think he was gonna be here at the next
Oh,
meeting.
he could write something.
can you just come in now and
There's
then?
going to be another meeting.
If council would entertain it now, he'd be.
Let's have it right now. We have a motion and a second. I mean, it's,
Because
We're
otherwise I
not
don't know.
broadcasting, so, just so you know.
We're not?
It's not
What is he
broadcasting.
wants to make other comments?
We are currently broadcasting.
Tell him to write them down then.
Come on in, Doug.
I know. Okay.
I just wanted to add one thing, and not specifically about the project that was here or anything, but one thing that I gleaned a little bit, I went to the Mid-Valley Master Plan Review last summer and fall for Eagle County. And one of the things that I took note of there was 82. CDOT was there and said that the Highway 82 has not reached capacity by any means. But of that capacity that 82 will carry, today, 50% of that capacity is going to Aspen, Snowmass area. So if you look at that and split the valley into four pieces like Carbondale, Basalt, Snowmass, and Aspen, already they're at capacity, you might say. Basalt and Carbondale still each should have 25% of that to have development or whatever to use 82. So it's at capacity, at 50% of the capacity of 82 right today is going to Aspen for their employees or whatever. So I thought that was a pretty interesting note that was in there, plus there's several other things, so, thank you.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to
I-
go into executive
No, we
session.
don't have the
We don't
motion.
have,
Yeah, we did.
No, we
No.
don't. It has to be read out.
I just read it.
You read it, you say so moved.
Did somebody say so moved?
You did. Did you?
No, I thought it had to be read out
I
fully.
just read it.
I would suggest just reading the motion.
We did just read the
Go
motion.
on.
Just do
So
it again.
Just do it again.
Mayor, I move that the town council enter executive session for purpose of discussing the purchase of acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of property interest in accordance to CRS 24-6-4024A, more specifically, the sale of Shining Mountain Way properties.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Natalie and I'll shut down.
Okie dokie, thank you. Okay, we have just come out of executive session, and I'm going to let our attorney, Jeff Conklin, comment regarding the content of our meeting.
Sure. Just going to state for the record that the time's now 8:42. The executive session's been concluded. The participants in the exec session were Katie Schwaryer, Jackie Whitsitt, Ryan Slack, Gary Tenenbaum, Ryan Mahoney, Susan Phelps, Ted Borchelt, and Jeff Conklin. If any person who participated in the exec session believes that any discussion, there's discussion of any matters outside of the topic for the motion to go into exec session, please raise that concern now. And if there's none, we can move on to the next agenda item.
Okay. So, the next agenda item is the first reading, right?
Yes.
Okay, is the first reading of ordinance number 11, series of 2019. I thought you were going to help me with this.
If you just read the title.
Just read the title first.
Okay.
Yeah.
An ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt approving a contract to buy and sell real estate for property located at 29 and 30 Shining Mountain Way and providing for other matters relating thereto. Okay.
Great. So as council knows, the town has been marketing the Shining Mountain Way property for sale. The town had previously engaged Ted Borchelt and Yana Dillard to market that property. The town received a number of different offers, and based on our review of them, have recommended moving forward on a contract with the Aspen School District for the sale of that property. That contract and the counteroffer that the town has prepared that includes several additional terms and conditions that to protect the town's interest in the property is included as part of the record, has been submitted and is an exhibit to that ordinance. So what we're looking for here today is and I guess let me step back and say that the approval process would be that as an ordinance, this would be approved on first reading and then set for a public hearing and a second reading, and then that ordinance would take effect 14 days after publication. And the town staff recommends that the council approve the ordinance to approve the real estate contract with the Aspen School District. And there's a suggested motion written in your packet.
This is an addition to that motion, is just giving the town attorney and the town manager ability to make additional changes as necessary. I think actually that's in the ordinance. But
It's in,
sure.
Microphone?
isn't it in the end?
It's in the ordinance.
Okay.
Mayor,
Okay.
I motion to approve the ordinance stated by the attorney Jeff Conklin on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading for May 28th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you, guys.
Good.
Thank you, Deb.
Is that
Okay.
motion
Welcome, thank you.
for the town attorney and the town manager to make additional?
No, it's in
It's
the
in the
ordinance.
ordinance,
It's in the.
Okay. All right, we're finished, so thank you very much. Have a
Okay,
good day.
thank
We're
you.
adjourned.
We already did.
What?
It's 5:30 at 5:30.
Yes.
5:30, 5:30.
Oh my God, oh my God, it's
Yes.
it's on 5:30 at 5:30.
What is?
Yeah.
And also, you guys, we were thinking about doing a site visit to the Snowmass Club Commons next Tuesday. It actually is very worth it.
Yes. To see where we might want to live one day.
Tuesday, the 21st.
Oh, I just thought it was in the actual exec session.
I was
Okay.
thinking you wanted to like ski down.
Oh, that's okay. I will